Hey everyone, today we're working on the backup camera wiring extension for the 5th gen 4runner. We're going to show you how to take apart the hatch, take the panel off, get inside, and disconnect the wiring so it can all be extended. First thing we're going to start with is removing this little plastic cover here. So we want to remove that small bolt in there. Use 10mm socket for that. And then you can start working on prying off the plastic. Will get disconnected from the hatch. So the first place you want to start to remove the plastic cover, there's kind of a little marking here and a little bit of a notch there. You can stick a small pry bar in that area and start to pry down on it. You want to work your way around the corner as you pop them loose. If the cover's never been removed before, it can take quite a bit of force to get them to pop loose. Now that we've got all the perimeter disconnected, there's two more clips up in there. You can see all the way up in there, there's one that needs to be popped loose, and same thing on the other side. So you want to shove your hand all the way up in there, kind of make a fist, push down on the plastic, get those two to come loose. Next thing I want to do is disconnect the lights. Unplug those gray connectors. There's one on each side that you want to disconnect. All right, everything is now disconnected. You'll want to push that direction on the plastic cover and it'll unhook up by the glass and you can remove the entire cover. So the first thing we need to do is pull down some of this plastic cover. There's kind of like a urethane sealer there that you just want to cut through as you're pulling down on the plastic. So you can see we removed about half of the plastic. You don't have to take it completely off, just go about halfway around, tuck it up inside the hatch, and then we have to remove this rubber plug right here so we can access one of the nuts that's inside there. So the next thing you want to do is get inside there and remove, there's a nut. Let's see. You can barely see it all the way up in that side, that hole there. That's a 10mm socket for that one. And then we have to remove all of these silver ones here, here, these two, and that one up in there as well. So you'll need a 10mm socket with an extension to get that one up through that hole. The rest are much more easy to get to. The next thing we want to do is pull the lock cylinder down and then disconnect this connector and that one, and then we'll want to push on this rubber grommet so that this can come through the hole from the other side when we're ready. Now that we've got all of those items disconnected from the inside, we're going to lower the hatch down so we can work on the outside portion. You want to make sure to cover up your latch with something so that the hatch doesn't lock and you're not able to get it open again. So cover the latch and then lower it down so that we can begin working on the outside of the hatch. So now this entire 4runner emblem, this whole trim piece needs to be removed. I'm going to start on one side and pull straight back. So there's one clip up high inside the plastic here that we're trying to get to break loose right now. So you kind of have to reach up underneath and push out on it to get it to come out.
It's coming up a lot.
Right.
Did you get it? Yeah.
So there's the clip right underneath the T emblem there. That square one is what needs to pop out of the top. So now we're ready to remove the camera from the hatch. Use a 10mm socket. Remove the 2 screws and then lift the hatch again to get inside and unclip the plastic connectors. So these square plugs have a small clip on each side of them. You need to squeeze them in and then push up on the clip to get it to pop through the hole. So once you squeeze the clips and get them wiggled up out of the hole a little bit, they'll be loose like that. And then you pull the hatch back down and you can pull the camera and the bracket out of the hatch. So now we've got the camera and the mount out of the hatch. We need to disconnect this short wiring harness. So you use a pair of pliers to squeeze the clip down and then pull straight back on the connector. Now you'll see inside there's 2 really small Phillips head screws. You need to remove those screws and take the camera out of the bracket. So here we've got the camera sitting in the original bracket. We already took the screws out of the back. You want to pull the camera directly out and you want to orient the camera the same way in the new bracket as the way it came out of the old one. You can see how the shape is cut the same. Put the camera into the new bracket and attach the screws from the back side. So we got our camera attached to the new bracket here. We also send along this plastic plug. You could put it into the hole on the original bracket, pop it into that hole, and then that original bracket will get attached back onto the hatch of the 4runner. So now we're putting the original camera bracket back into the hatch. We put the little plastic plug in the end there. You just push it back into the hole and then install the screws that were holding it originally. So we got the original camera bracket installed onto the hatch. Now we're going to put the plastic cover and everything back on here. So So we just want to make sure that we feed the wires back through that hole there. And then you'll just align your plastic clips and pop them back into the original hole. So we've got the cover put back on the outside. So we're going to be getting back to the inside of the hatch here. And we need to put the lock cylinder back in place first. And then we'll reconnect this harness here. And then pull the grommet through and make sure it's sealed around the opening. And then replace all of the 10mm nuts that you removed earlier. So now we're going to prep the hatch to fish the wires through. There's a few things we need to remove here to get ready to do that. Want to pop this plastic cover off the back first. And there's a few rubber grommets that need to be removed. And the next thing we want to do is get ready to pull the headliner down so we can get access inside there. So there's small plastic clips here we need to loosen and pop those out, and then the headliner will come down. So now we have access to all of the holes we need to run the wires through. So we're gonna run a fish tape or like a piece of wire up through there first to connect the actual wiring to pull through. So where we want the wires to go, we're gonna feed it in from this end, and it's gonna go up the hatch on this side, along here, around the corner, and then out through this rubber grommet here. So what we're using is a length of welding wire. It's about 10 feet long. So we're gonna take that and feed it up through this pocket to start with, and try to show you guys exactly where it needs to go. So we want to be, you can see all the way at the back of the screen there in the top right corner opening, that's where we want the wire to feed through. So now we can see it here in this opening where we pulled the grommet out. I should be able to grab a hold of it and pull it through. You want to pull it out of that hole, feed a good length through. Just make sure that your wire doesn't go all the way in from where you started. You want to leave a little extra hanging out. And then to make it around that corner, you want to feed the end back into that hole and over towards this wiring harness where it comes through the grommet. So just make sure that you'll want to pull that little extra loop through, but again, just don't pull too much. You want to leave a little extra hanging out the other end of the hatch. Something to note as you're feeding the wire around this corner here, you want to make sure that it stays in between these two close layers here. If it goes on the other side, you won't be able to find the wire at the other end there. So keep it in between the two close layers as you go around the corner. So here's what is included in your reverse camera wiring kit. You'll have the actual mount here that the camera goes into. We showed that earlier in the video. The length of wire, the conduit to put around the wiring, and then we have heat shrink solder connectors. You should have 8 of those total, and the 2 carriage head bolts which attach the actual bracket to the swing out. And there will also be the plastic square plug included in there, which we also installed earlier. So the next thing we're going to do is take the tape off the wiring, and then we want to attach one end of all the wires to the piece of welding wire that we just fished through the hatch, and then we'll pull those through the hatch. So now we've taken our length of wire and we looped it around the end of this piece of welding wire, kind of twisted the end together so that the wire can't come out, and then we're going to tape it on there just to ensure that it doesn't come off as you're fishing the wires through the hatch. Now that our wires are taped on to the fishing cable there, we'll start feeding it through. All right, so we leave about 2 or 3 feet of wire hanging out the bottom of the hatch there. And then we'll start to bring it around the corner over to the next opening. Next, we're going to trim off most of our fishing wire here, so we just have a short piece left. And then we're going to go ahead and route that up into this rubber grommet here and pull the wires through that piece. As you're running your fishing wire through the grommet there, you just want to make sure that you try to straighten the grommet if the wire gets caught, and just work the tip of it through there so it comes out the other end. It's going to want to get caught on the way through. Just try to straighten the rubber as much as you can and work it through. So once it comes out the other end, you can pull down the headliner a little bit and then continue to pull your wires through. So we did add just a little bit of grease to the wire so that it would slide through the grommet easier. Now we're continuing to feed the wire through. We want to get it all the way through so that there's no slack or loops in the wire there. So we just finished feeding our wire all the way through that rubber grommet, and then we reinstalled these caps here, right there and right there. And now we need to come down to the inside here, pop up this plastic cover, and then there's a bolt in there that requires 10mm socket. Now we're going to go and tuck the wires in above the headliner and down the side of the pillar behind the plastic cover. Next, we want to continue feeding the wires down behind this plastic panel. This is the area right below the tail light cover. Then we'll pull them out with the plastic cover we just took off at the bottom. So we got a little bit more of our wire pulled through. Basically, you want to leave just enough to reach this connector in here easily. That's how much wire you want left on the hatch side. Otherwise, you'll pull the rest of the wire all the way through. So now we've moved underneath the vehicle, where we're on the passenger side here. Underneath by the rear, there's a grommet here with some wires coming through it. We poked a hole in that grommet, and then we took about a 2-foot piece of the fish tape or wire, whatever you're using there, and we poked it through the grommet from the bottom, and that comes up through to the top side here, and it'll come out through that one hole where we took the plastic cover off. Now we've moved back up to the inside of the vehicle here. We took the long end of our wiring and we attached it to that short piece of fish tape that we stuck up through the hole from the bottom. We connected those to each other. Now we're going to pull all the wires through from the top out through the bottom of the vehicle. Now that all the wires are fed out the bottom of the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and put this plastic cover and the tie-down hook back in position. Also, after installing the tie-down hook, you'll want to make sure you go back to the top and reinstall your headliner. So now we've got our wires pulled out the bottom here. We've got all the extra length coming out the bottom of the vehicle. It will depend on which swing out you have on your rear bumper as to where you want to run the wires next. If you just have the single full-length swing that pivots on the right-hand side, you'll want to just leave the wires where they are. Just hang them here and they'll feed up to the inside of the bumper after it's installed. If you have the dual swing or the single full length with left hand pivot swing, you'll want to route these wires up over the frame and then attach them to this cross member all the way across to the other side, up over the frame, and then let them hang there until the bumper is installed. Next thing we need to do is this little piggyback wiring harness that was attached to the back of the camera. We need to cut that in half so that we can extend the wires. So we want to use the end with the white connector on it, and you want to strip the ends of these wires to prepare them for going into the connector. Alright, we've stripped the wires on all 4 wires on the connector side and then also on the long wires that we pulled through the hatch. Now we're reattaching the white connector to the wires in the hatch. So we use the heat shrink connectors that are provided in the kit. So you want to make sure that your wires overlap in the middle of the heat shrink connector and that they're both touching the solder, and then you just heat it up with a lighter and make sure the solder is melted completely inside so that the wires will be attached and that the heat shrink is completely shrunk down on both ends. So you want to do all 4. As you can see, the colors in the wiring extenders don't match all of the colors from the Toyota plug, so you'll want to make sure that you write down which wires are coordinated with each other once you get them all attached. Alright, now that you've got your wiring harness all soldered back together, we got to make sure that it's routed properly so that it doesn't get hung up with the rear window when it rolls down. So you can see the wires here. We want to make sure that they're connected all the way back in the corner with the zip tie to that wiring harness. And we need to be sure that the wires are above this piece here so it doesn't get tangled up in there. And then you can see we attached it to this existing wiring harness, going over through across that way and back to the original plug, and the camera's been connected again and zip tied here so that there's no extra wires, no slack in the wires or nothing to get hung up anywhere. Alright, so now our camera has been all plugged in and wires have been routed, so it's time to put the hatch back together. So we're going to seal up the plastic cover there. You just stick it right back down where it was before, and that rubber sticky sealer will hold it in place again. And then we also need to reinstall the rubber grommet and the plastic cap for the handle area down here. Now we're ready to put the interior cover back on the hatch. So you want to hook it by the glass first, lift it up high enough to hook it into place. Before we completely reattach the cover on the inside of the hatch, you want to make sure that you plug in the lights that we disconnected earlier when we took it apart. Get those on each side. Now we can reconnect all the plastic clips. Be sure that they line up properly with the hole. Don't try to force them in because it'll just smash the plastic clip and then they won't work anymore. So be sure it's lined up and then push them up into place. Give them a firm tap and they'll lock into place. So now that the plastic hatch cover is back on, the last thing we need to do is reinstall the pull handle. And the plastic cover that goes on top. All right, now we've got the bumper fully installed. We're going to get back to the reverse camera wiring. So earlier on, before we put the bumper on, we routed the wires up across the body, underneath the body of the vehicle, above this spare tire cross member. And we routed them over the frame and onto the other side here near the body mount. We came out from the top of the frame and then went behind this bumper support in through, there's a small hole that we provide in the bumper that comes out right here by the swing out pivot. So you want to route your wires through there and then they'll go up the swing arm. Also, you'll want to attach a power wire for your license plate light. So the wire that we tap into is this green wire in the top plug of the trailer wiring harness connection. So we just put in a little spade connector there that clamps on, and then you can run your power wire, plug it directly into that one. And you'll want to route this wire and the ground wire for your license plate light right in the same place as the wires for the reverse camera. So you'll follow it up through the bumper, through that same hole up here, and then they'll get routed together onto the inside of the swing arm. So looking back underneath the vehicle here, we can show you where we attached the ground wire for our license plate light. We used an existing threaded hole here with a 6mm screw, flat washer, and the black piece of wire. So we run that wire up around the corner and out through the small hole in the bumper, along with the reverse camera wiring as well. Before you completely finish connecting all of your wires for the backup camera, you want to make sure that you have enough slack right here so that the gate can be in the fully open position at the farthest locking pin position there, and that you've got enough slack in the wire so it doesn't bind up when the gate opens all the way. So now we're back here up at the back of the bumper with the swing out open, and we've routed our wires through the provided hole in the bumper here. So the wires for both the reverse camera and the license plate light are inside this wire loom here. So we ran it up and it's attached to the zip tie tabs that we provide. We ran the wires through here first. You want to run them all back behind this area before you solder your connections back onto the wire extensions for the reverse camera. So from earlier on in the install, we had just the little piggyback wiring harness that plugs into the camera left over from when we snipped it in half. So we took that portion, connected it to our wires with the solder connections, and put the wire loom on. And then the other 2 wires for the license plate, we came through the same wire loom and then went up vertically up through this existing hole, and then came around the back side here and routed the wires through to the back of where the light is mounted on the license plate bracket. So you want to make sure that you mount the light first, put the wires through the hole in the back of the bracket, and then solder the connections together. Or you could put some kind of like spade connector there if you want to be able to unplug it.